Nate, you were talking about the comments on German YouTube videos in Denglish.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, it's just more that like if you follow anything with like German music at all, or like sort of German rap culture, there's so much English that gets incorporated, but using German grammar, and it can be very, very funny. I went and looked up one of the German rap songs that I know, the song Mein Block by Sido, which is from like the mid 2000s. And it's become like a German hip hop classic at this point. But one of the comments on the bottom, if I remember correctly, the guy said, mit diesem Shit hat der Boy der ganze Game gechanged. I was just like, what the fuck is
this? Is what Brexit took from us. We could have slowly merged English and German into an official, like, single, wonderful language where you could end a sort of a sentence with a phrase like "pimp und schwag," and here we are now.
Yeah. You have those guys who are just like, if it wasn't for Churchill, like we'd always be speaking German right now. Well, fuck Churchill, because actually that would have like been sick. And if we could have had weird German English rap, then it would have all been worth it.
Only the language, not the politics.
Trying to arrange it so that we get the Kaiserreich timeline where we lose the First World War and we end up speaking German that way.
I mean, I do remember that there was a line, I'm not going to quote it verbatim, but in that song, Mein Block, where it's something to the effect of like, am 40 stark hat ein Kerl an Studio, rappt und macht Traps auf die Beats von Coolio. And it's just like, you don't really have to speak German to understand that.
You'd have Nadine Dorries doing her weird TikTok rap, but it'd be in hybrid German English. And I think that'd be very funny.
Awesome.
Milo and I have now, because Milo doesn't speak German, but he's been to Berlin enough times that he's just sort of gotten used to hearing this, that I have actually seen people post stuff that basically is like, ja, keine Sorge, aber du bist echt low-key auf some gay shit. And it's just like, I can't believe that this is meant to be taken seriously.
In the mid 2000s, I can't remember who the artist was, but there was like this Muslim rapper who like was very popular in the UK among kind of like British Muslims, but he was from like, he lived in Denmark, so it was like a mixture of like Palestinian Arabic, Danish, and English, and it was just very funny because you sort of have like, I have no idea if like the Arabic and the Danish like work together, but you'd have these like Danish words which I'm not going to try like reproduce. But then every so often you just have things like "fuck the police" in English, and it was very funny.
I was worried, or I was kind of laughing internally. I didn't want to make a joke that would just be like full on me picking on Hussein in a way that sounds like it can anyway come across as like intolerant. But I was gonna be like, oh yeah, I remember the guy who did "Dirty Kufar." That was a great song.
It was a very good song. I actually like look.
It's a banger, man. Seriously,
I enjoyed Dirty Kufar. I got into trouble. Like I had a CD, and the CD, because like my friend like made a copy of it for me, except he wrote on the CD "Dirty Kufar." So when a teacher found it, and this teacher, like, bear in mind that this teacher was not like, didn't keep it discreet, went to the class and was just like, so what does it mean? What is Dirty Kufar exactly?
Have you brought enough for the whole class?
That's right. That's right. And
actually, I've got this really great video you guys should watch.
Yeah, because at the end of the video there was a fucking beheading, wasn't there? Jesus.
No,
Christ.
at the end of the video he says like, we're gonna take him over like we took over the Shah, like we took down the Twin Tower, and then like it shows 9/11 and everyone's laughing.
There was another one of those viral songs where at the end there was a beheading, and it was just like,
there's definitely some violent shit.
Yeah.
Like, there's a person getting like obviously shot to death in the video and stuff like that. So yeah, it's pretty. And then obviously ISIS or proto-ISIS, Al-Qaeda doing monkey bars shit, like in the ISIS gym. But
simpler times, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Now
true medium of cultural exchange, European hip hop.
Well, now the problem is that production value is too good, right? Because like I think one of the appeals of Dirty Kufar was just that it was all really grainy, and like it was like this mishmash of like, and it was definitely made on like, what, I don't know, it was before Final Cut Pro, but like Windows XP, like the default like video editor, right?
Windows
it was
Movie Maker,
yeah, basically,
yeah, with some animations of Tony Blair turning into a pig and stuff like that. Yeah,
and the problem is that production value is just too good now, and that's why like it won't ever have the same impact.
I like the idea though that you could get like, what you essentially had was what, like jihadist pen and pixel.
Yeah,
basically,
very amusing. So like, instead, because who was the kid in the No Limit Empire who had the little Bentley made for him, like the Bentley go-kart?
I don't remember.
Yeah, get that, but like get like a Power Wheels that's a Hilux with the gun on the back of it.
Yeah.
Cool. So hi everyone, it's TF.
Podcast about sort of 90s bootleg hip hop or 2000s bootleg hip hop.
2000s, yeah. Because I was in university. I remember seeing that shared around on forums, and you were supposed to be like, "Oh, isn't this horrible?" And I was like, "Actually, this song is good."
That's right. And those forums, was it laissez-faire? Was it Light Fighter? Who knows?
Laissez-faire wasn't around yet. It was general bullshit on the Something Awful forums. I do remember that because I am officially old.
I was talking to Alice.
It is 2005. You are listening to a banger about how the West will be converted to Islam by any means necessary. You have 4 tabs open of tabs hadn't been invented.
You had 4 windows open.
You have 4 windows. Yeah, you have 4 windows open where you're googling like Zooton's saxophone player feet. This is the best your life is ever going to be.
I remember at that time I had 1 computer for forums and 1 computer for World of Warcraft. My life has gotten a lot better since then.
Yeah, because the 2 different kinds of going on the computer.
Yeah, absolutely. But hi everyone, this is a podcast. It's the podcast you're listening to right now. It's TF, and we're recording a free episode a week in advance.
The free one.
God damn it.
Deputized. Milo's out, having been taken out by the forces of Islam.
Yeah, no, Milo is on a secret mission to go
He's been hired by Pfizer to test the efficacy of a new anti-diarrhea medicine, but first he has to get the worst diarrhea of his life.
So it's TF, it's the free one. We're recording it a week early because Riley is about to go on holiday. And I'm going to be taking some well-earned time off, having fun in the sun. That's right. I'm going to Afghanistan as a trip that I'm just doing myself.
Yep.
And then I'm going to go get elected mayor of South Bend.
Sounds great. Make sure to take a photo of yourself holding an AR-15 with the weirdest overhand grip you've ever seen in your life. A grip that if you were to swing the rifle up to the high ready, you would throw the crook of your elbow over your own eyes. That's the Pete Buttigieg promise right there.
Yeah, it's
I'm
getting
just
ready
telling
to
you. I'm
spray
going to demonstrate it to you on here, and maybe Hussein and Alice, you can see this on the camera. Riley in front of me. Pete Buttigieg is holding his rifle in such a way that he's basically hold his right hand on the pistol grip with his finger over the trigger well, and his left hand is over. He's got his elbow over the barrel, and he's holding it that way. So if he were to swing it up to the high ready, as I'm going to demonstrate, he would do.
Yeah, so he's
serious.
So he's holding the gun in the same way that Lil Wayne like held a guitar, like back in those years when he was like playing guitar for some reason.
This is 2005.
That's actually the special
episode.
kind of like gun holding that you unlock when you prestige the regular kind, and it's like no scoping. You get some extra sort of.
I just here's the thing, right? Like I know I'm not enough of a gun guy. I'm not a gun guy at all. I don't care about guns at all. I just happen to use one particular gun in training a lot. But it's like when you look at that photo, the sort of authenticrat for Democrats, it's like, see, I did my time in the salt mines, fucking for empire, and now I can prove that this is why AR-15s belong killing people in Afghanistan, but not on our streets. But then you post this photo of yourself in such a way that like it looks as though you have come to Earth as an alien, and you're like, oh, is this a weapon? How does one conjure this? And just hold it in the strangest way possible. Like
he has like sweated through turf bangs and a Kubrick stare in that photo. It's the most he's sitting on a folding chair. It's so weird.
I don't know why I thought of that Pete Buttigieg photo, but as soon as I said I was going on holiday, it just popped into my mind, bidden from nowhere, coming up from deep file storage. But look, I've got some stuff to talk about today. There are some items. Some doings have...
We got the Zootons. We're going to talk about Los Campesinos for a little bit.
Yeah. We're going to talk about how the David Guetta album, Guetta Blaster. No, I've got a few things. Look, the main development in local Britain local news, beep, 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 that I want to talk about is...
Sorry, is that the nonce detector?
Yeah. That's the local news detector.
Two detectors you don't want to get mixed up.
No, this is the local news detector is going crazy, which is that essentially what is now happening all across sort of the broader West, Britain, New Zealand, Canada, the States, etc., is that trends in shoplifting have been radically changing for the last year.
People are going Jean Valjean mode. And
somewhat, yes, Alice. Where it said usually, statistically, this is from The Grocer, the grocery industry's trade publication that I sometimes read.
That you religiously subscribe to, yes.
Yeah, well, I like the funnies in The Grocer.
I used
they
to
just pick off of the grocery store related Far Side
I very
cartoons.
briefly worked at their competitor magazine, like back in the day.
The Greengrocer.
No, not the Greengrocer. It was called the company that like published it was called New Trade.
Anytime the Grocer does like a transphobic editorial, they're always like, "Oh, it's the Sunday Grocer. It's got a different editorial board."
Yeah, I was actually the reactionary columnist of the Grocer.
Brendan O'Neill of the Grocer.
I'm just imagining like a lifestyle brand magazine for people who work in corner shops called Cornerist or something like that.
I used to work for this place called the Retail Express, which was basically the like competitor paper that was designed specifically for newsagents. And I got in via nepotism, which is to say that one of the reporters came to my parents' shop looking bored out of his mind. And I was at journalism school at the time, and I had been rejected from a internship at The Observer. So I was just like, "Hey, I'm starting journalism school next week, and I really need something. Can I like join your paper?" And he was just like, "Yeah, I don't care." And then he just left. And that's how I got my start. My career.
This is also how I got on this podcast.
Yeah. you basically you're like, look, it's not easy to get a foot in the door in journalism. I had to work at the Grocer.
No, it was a competitor. We were less reactionary, and also crucially, we had less money, so we couldn't have like the fucking Brendan O'Neill.
You were hungry. You were underdog.
Yeah, I did a lot.
You're doing real journalism.
That's right. I did a very big story about a change of price of cigarettes, which got 4 complaints. So
here's the substance. Though, is that
I just love the idea of Tacky writing an article about how like the Nazis actually had the best Mister sprays for green produce.
So this is in the past people would usually steal stuff like booze and razors and all this, but essentially now the Grocer is saying that with the cost of living, these choices are getting different, and essentially we have a return. Which was at multi-decade lows of the activity of stealing to eat rather than stealing to sell on.
What you might loosely call like crimes of subsistence or of survival.
And the thing I wanted to bring up here is that 7.3 million adults in Britain skipped meals or went without food for a day due to costs. Like that's like fully more than 10% of the population. If the population is about 70 million, that's just adults.
Yeah,
which is astonishing. And so this is to the point where now we've seen images. I've seen images at least, sort of reading sort of various sort of trade publications, because that's where a lot of the stuff that you just
the Grocer on Sunday.
Well, one of the real reasons I tend to read trade publications is it's the people in those industries writing and talking for one another. It's kind of the same reason I read the FT. It's just like, no, you have to just get the information out. And so this was one analyst, Shore Capital, quoted in the Grocer, said that police and courts are essentially unable to cope as the temptation to shoplift is likely to grow for some. But yeah, so we've seen now like individual chocolate bars or whatever in the same kind of like plastic like armored security packaging that you would see like fucking razors in. At this point, and that's only being applied to more foods.
All you have to do is get a little like neodymium magnet, and pretty much any of these security packaging just pops right open. Just for the record, but I mean, so we've systematically defunded the criminal justice system, which is not just the police but also the courts, to the extent that, like, whether they want to or not, enforce the law on shoplifting for these sort of crimes of desperation. It's sort of immaterial anyway.
Yeah. And the strange thing is, and this is sort of what I'm driving at here, right? Is that we have number one, this again, return to kind of the bad old days, if you will, whether it's Victorian diseases, sort of power cuts like the 70s, confusing imperial system. With all of this return to the bad old days,
the vibe shift, it's real and it's coming.
But that is. Essentially that it's so driven from the top, right? Where for example, like as you were saying, Alice, like whether or not they want to, police chiefs are now saying, we're basically saying, look, if we see someone stealing to eat, were going to try to not prosecute them to the full extent of the law, which is
like on the face of it, both very embarrassing that the Conservatives would outflank the cops from the right. But, you can sort of say, oh, this is a nice thing about British liberalism is that it allows this kind of like, moral compass and the parochialism of the local chief constable to be like, actually, I don't want to enforce that law. But it doesn't matter. It's an irrelevance because even if you had your James Anderson or whoever who was like, no, actually, I think if you take a chocolate bar off of the shelf and walk out without paying, you should be shot. It doesn't fucking matter if you can't do it, if you don't have the budget to provide for that, which none of them do. So,
but what Kit Malthouse has said, the policing minister, is he said no, all of the laws have to be enforced completely. No. All the laws have to be enforced evenly. Because he says justice should be blind, and by lowering the crime rate by prosecuting people stealing to eat, you will somehow this is what he actually said, by lowering the crime rate by prosecuting people stealing to eat, you will improve the economic prospects of an area because crime drives down prosperity, not the other way around.
That's exactly the kind of thing that you get when you have a policing minister, when you have a job that is like relatively unempowered to do anything except chase statistics, which is like actually one of the ways in which you can make an already bad model of policing much worse is to try and like do predictive policing or targeted policing based on statistics. And so all you can do is just this kind of like numbers chasing, this kind of red meat, and it's so irrelevant because nobody has the police officers to go and arrest somebody for shoplifting. Nobody has, and if they are arrested, then they won't be prosecuted. If they are prosecuted, they won't go to court, because at every stage, there's this attritional aspect of austerity where there's no police left because we can't pay for them. There's no lawyers left because we can't pay for them either. All of the courts are backlogged through for the next 5 years, and we're closing half of the courtrooms anyway.
And that's, I think it's also not to say that like, that it would be better that they were. I mean,
no, of course
this
not.
is
I'm just saying that this is not something. This is not a choice, right? This is something that has been imposed as a consequence of austerity.
Well, I'll give you another example of this that's just related to the British state in general, because I'm in the process of trying to get my British driver's license. Booking a road test, takes months right now because there's an enormous backlog, and their solution is, well, during COVID, we limited testers to doing 6 tests a day, but now we're going to take it back up to 7 tests a day. But there's still a backlog of millions of people. Or similarly for visas, when they added in the Ukraine family scheme, which is responding to an emergency, they basically said, oh yeah, and by the way, we're going to delay everybody else's immigration stuff because we just don't have the capacity for it. And so if you're waiting on immigration stuff,
capacity right now.
So if you're waiting on, spouse visas, student visas, settlement visas, all the things you need until you get a British passport and you no longer have to deal with the fucking Home Office, that's all being delayed because the budget's been cut. Now, granted, the Home Office makes an enormous profit on visas, for example, but none of that's reinvested in the Home Office. It's immoral that they do it, but they don't even do it to sustain themselves. They just do it to be punitive. Similarly, they are charging a health surcharge for everyone who gets a visa in this country that's notionally supposed to pay for the NHS, even though you pay for the NHS with your income taxes. But that money they charge immigrants to renew their visas doesn't go to the NHS. It goes to a general fund for Parliament. So you have all these instances of the state at capacity or way, way overstretched continues to get worse. And it's that same problem you have with the police, you have with the immigration system, you have with basic things like the immigration system has been mostly privatized in terms of who processes stuff, but even that completely at capacity. And it's anything that requires an interaction with the British state, you realize just how threadbare it is and how people are oh yeah, that we haven't gone far enough. We need to get rid of more of it. And it's just what are you going to replace it with? Because even the privatized stuff, like I said, VFS Global, the private company that handles immigration stuff where you can pay extra to have it expedited through a private company, they can't take any more stuff. They've been shut down by and large because the Home Office is at capacity. So it's
I was going to say that there's a very good chance that I'm not going to be able to go on my honeymoon this year because my passport is still somewhere in the passport office because of the same things, right? And it's I phone them every time I phone them up, bearing in mind that you're not really talking to the passport office, you're talking to a contracted company that does all the phone, like all the sort of like customer facing stuff for the passport office, to the extent where it becomes so absurd that I was calling someone in the passport office while I was inside it because I couldn't talk to someone who was working in there. A very absurd day, like in Peterborough. But it's just like another example of just like, yeah, like these guys can't handle the crisis. And crucially, like a couple of weeks ago, the answer that the government gave to like, you know, the ongoing situation and the fact that like loads of people are like missing, like, you know, important flights and everything was we're going to privatize the passport office even more. So that's good.
I want to focus back on the food issue, right?
But let me just bring it back to that, which is to say that the Britain's dedication to austerity is very strange to me as an American, because even though America loves austerity, it doesn't love austerity for cops. And that's the thing that's very interesting here, is that like you have this situation in which you have both austerity cutting economically so bad over the course of the last 12 years that you're now in a situation where like a significant chunk of British people are food insecure. You know, something like estimates between 33 and 50% of children in this country live in food poverty. Like there's so many problems. And that's now being manifested here where literally like the cops are saying, well, morally, maybe we shouldn't prosecute these things.
There was something that really struck me, which is that the most recent Police Federation conference, there was a young, like very junior detective who sort of savaged Priti Patel on the basis that to work as a police officer, to work as a like starting police officer, she was below the poverty line doing it. And it's like, that's not typically the sign of a society that cares about like maintaining its own continuity, right?
Yeah,
if
like,
the people that you get to enforce the law are not like,
it's what we were talking about earlier, right? Is that this is, I think, emblematic of the fact that in Britain there are two big machines that are designed to crush you. There's one that's shaped like a cop, which everyone in charge absolutely loves but doesn't maintain. And then there's the one that is actually crushing more and more people, which is the fact that there's nothing that there is that things
it's just the neglect.
There is the sort of the jackboot of the law that's almost become, with the exception of big sort of showpiece protests or like just harassing people for like, you know, being young and black and in the street.
Like, you can get like the big showpiece things. You can get like sort of drive-by acts of brutality or, you know, cowardice or neglect or whatever. I think that's also something that's like strangely is also a consequence of defunding, is the kind of people who would become cops now, the kind of people who are truly in it for that, because there's no security from it otherwise.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the food insecurity part comes like the overwhelming majority of people who are in food poverty in this country work. It's just that wages are so low in this country, and the wage growth has been so anemic that, you know, people are earning in terms of purchasing power are earning less than they were earning in 2008 in this country. So like, and food prices have skyrocketed because of you know, supply shocks and inflation. And so now you're in the situation, where like the cop, like I had this horrible scenario in my head of like, you know, the sort of the cop as drug dealer thing turned on its head, where instead of the cops robbing drug dealers and selling drugs, the cops, you know, harassing shoplifters and taking the food so they can eat. Like, it's just this genuinely insane situation.
You know what you're describing is you're describing Tunisia in 2009.
Yeah, well, that worked out great.
Yeah,
it was, but it was. I think the thing to remember is it was food insecurity and an encounter with a heavy-handed police officer.
I just think about the upcoming price rises for most obviously wheat, but there's going to be, you know, everything downstream of that, most likely beef. That's gonna be an interesting moment in our history.
I'm just imagining how would Good Morning Britain react to someone immolating themselves after an encounter with the police, like what happened in Tunisia. And I'm just imagining them just being like, "Oh, that's not very green, is it? That's not very environmentally conscious, is it?"
I think the answer is you dox their family. You know, the left wing activist who professional self-immolator.
He burned himself with wood, and that's actually not sustainable.
This member of the public who committed harakiri outside of the Tesco in Swindon actually was a member of the Labour Party in 2007.
Interesting. Very interesting.
We've obtained their credit card records from open banking, and you can actually see that they did in fact buy a Big Mac rather than the Savor menu, and so we are going to just assume that food poverty in the country is not a problem. It is the two things of the ability, the desire of British society to reproduce itself, whether by allowing itself to reproduce in a way that is, say, upholds human dignity, for example, by paying people enough to be able to eat, or the other part, which is, well, if we're not going to do that, then we're going to reproduce society through the sheer, jackbooted imposition of order. And there just seems to be there seems to be such a disconnect.
The machine is itself breaking down.
Yeah.
And what's really funny is that, like, the amount to which they claim to love it, it's like, oh, I love my car, I drive it everywhere with a handbrake on. And for some reason now, it's making these weird noises at me.
Well, Riley, I don't know if you wanted to move on something, because there was one point that I wanted to make about this sort of a difference between, in the United States, obviously they're dealing with similar issues with inflation, with commodity costs, with the lack of availability of things like new cars. Groceries have increased in price, fuel has massively increased in price. Americans love huge fucking trucks and cars that have terrible fuel economy. So you have a situation where, it was already expensive for someone to fill up their car, truck, whatever, and now it's even more expensive. And the American response has by and large been to say, let's go Brandon about it. You know what I mean? Like, lose their minds and blame Joe Biden for everything, even stuff that's completely exogenous to American politics. But then you also hear in Britain, it seems like that never seems to happen. Instead, it's just more along the lines of, like, people being like, well, I can eat this fucking shit for 12 pence a meal, and I liked it when I eat fucking, pigeon droppings. So why are these fucking lazy people on benefits not eat shit like me? Like, it's this bizarre sense of, I'm all right, Jack. And I'm not saying that the American total psychotic response, that's obviously egged on by the fact that you have a non-Republican president right now, is the right one. But I think the extent to which, even when you have this very obvious, incredible, stupid situation on the part of the government, they have fucked it, and people seem so unwilling to confront it that way. It's always sort of like, it's always sold or discussed as like an individual failing. And it's like, it's not really an individual failing when wages haven't gone up. They've actually shrunk in purchasing power in the last 14 years, and overnight people's gas and electric bills doubled, quadrupled in some cases. My power bill went up by 100%. My gas bill went up by 200% overnight on April 1st, and it's going to go up again in October. And like, thanks be to fucking God, I'm great, because I'm basically a professional circus clown, and as a result, I have income. But like, I know everyone around us is suffering from this shit. Like, and if I was, even when I first started doing this on my own, when I quit my job and started producing, if I had been hit by a shock like this, I don't know what I would have done. I genuinely don't know what I would have done. I wouldn't have had enough money to pay the bills. Like, to have this stuff happen overnight, and you just look at the way that this is being addressed is sort of like this moral failing. And it's like, look, man, how am I supposed to morally heat my home? Like, there's only fucking two ways to do it: the fucking socket, or, the gas boiler.
I think the way I tend to see it is that more than anything else, is that both what you're describing, right? The let's go Brandon stuff, or sort of the British sort of just systemic winding down of even the repressive functions of the state. It's, in both senses, it's a form of denial of looking at a set of problems that are too complicated to solve, or not the problem you want to solve, and then just solving the problem you feel like solving instead, and then just allowing things to slowly unravel in front of you. And it's at this point, I think my perspective on it, right? I think the one we've been talking about is more like, it is very strange to see a state voluntarily fail, right? Because that's the strangeness of it, right? To have the playbook for where it goes, right? And to just see it, to be entirely self-inflicted, whether it's because of, and in Britain, I don't think it's not even because of elite capture necessarily. It's just, I think that in the sense of, well, it's not as though the British elite had to be subject to capture in order to like systematically starve like, British people. But I think that there is a sense of elite disconnection in that even the repressive functions of the state are being allowed to wither because of this very strange phenomenon of total disconnection from and denial of just the reality outside Westminster. That's why it's sort of, you come back to, this feels very much like the Roman Senate debating, who should be made quaestor or whatever this year, while the Goths are in the city. You know,
let's see My Chemical Romance in Milton Keynes.
That's right. That's right. We should have taken this as a sign. Every time Goths come back, there's a recession.
Well, also, I also bear in mind that
the 80s, 2008, ancient Rome. Now,
I don't think that the Helvetii or the Visigoths had an album as good as the Black Parade.
I mean, I was also going to say that emo music like came out of, or it sort of like emerged during that kind of weird period between like everyone sort of acknowledging that the Iraq War was a failure and like the upcoming recession, right? So the revival of emo. Like, I feel like some smartsy pants analyst who like does FT, like lunch with the FT, should have known, but like when emo was coming back, there would be a big problem.
Yeah, doing the like hemline measure of political economy, but instead of that, you're looking at people's fringes.
Right. Although that can be a statistic that can be confounded with other fringe-related beliefs. I think,
just a fringe on one side is what you're measuring.
Absolutely.
The line does go down.
Like, look. It is very and to see again the other side, right, of this, with the alleged other side of this, right? While one side is sort of so caught up in its fantasies, it's not even able to execute the thing that we don't want it to execute, but that it wants to execute. The other side is or the other side of the same side seems to just be, every time they go on these, again, polished media operators, unlike the other generation, cannot stop going on the radio and then just immediately stepping into a bucket and falling down the stairs of being asked a question about trans people and then just basically sputtering an answer
bomb.
As though
we're the smoke bomb now. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I was, I'm very hopeful that Australia is the sort of death knell for this kind of politics, but on the other hand, Britain is far more deranged about trans people, and it works much better here. So,
it's unable, and that's just this other thing. This thing I keep picking up. This theme is just the inability to collect and process new information. It's just the same kinds of things just repeating over and over again as the outside world slowly gets worse, and even the way they want to exercise coercive control over the outside world slowly becomes less able to do that. It is very, I don't know,
country
very odd
sick
to
building
see.
syndrome.
Yeah, that's right. Speaking of things with sick building syndrome, though, did we
remember cool name for like a leftist architecture podcast?
Remember Web3?
Yeah, it was a web for each of the genders.
So the if we all remember Web 2, the promise of liberation.
You're
into Web 3. What's a woman?
Yeah, Web 2. Web 2 was when there were guy things and when there were girl things, and there was a separation between those. You had the Polly Pocket forum, and you had something awful. Now, Web 3 has blown that all apart.
I was on weird Polly Pocket in like 2005. It was really foundational to my sense of humor.
Yeah, Web 1 is the Space Jam website that's still around. Web 2 is the interactive website they made for Suicide Squad. Web 3 is that you put on a VR headset to experience the Morbius launch event,
and somehow that's highly financialized.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we remember Web 3, right?
The Morbius launch event.
Yeah, we all went to the Morbius launch event. We all bought the special NFT that says we're true Morbius fans. And then wouldn't you know it, it turns out that one wallet just bought all the special NFTs, and now none of us got to go to the Morbius launch event.
It's bullshit.
Very sad.
It's bullshit.
I have once again done the thing where I have read a paper by Vitalik Buterin, the guy who came up with, the guy who with JP Morgan came up with Ethereum, because if you recall, he got mad at World of Warcraft for nerfing a spell.
Could you explain that? When World of Warcraft was big, I think I was not on the computer that much.
I was never a World of Warcraft person.
So Vitalik Buterin is the founder of Ethereum, and I get also with some very big banks, but claimed that he got the idea for Ethereum when some or another ability in World of Warcraft was unilaterally made worse by Blizzard. And then he said, the problem is centralization. Because
Web 3.0 is a protest against the mods.
Essentially, yeah.
And who are the Bank of England or the Federal Reserve but the mods of money?
And What I sort of thought was and what we sort of talked about quite a bit on the show, of course, was that the moment this sort of idea of circumventing the mods by creating a kind of append-only database where you could buy and sell, Excel spreadsheet random entries created by a graphics card from one another, was of course that this whole idea of a decentralized art market, of democratizing access to lending through this, of decentralized finance, all that stuff. Immediately, it became rife with speculation, Ponzi schemes, and pyramid schemes. It was completely useless right away.
It's like there's a bunch of mushrooms on this rotten log.
Yeah, I thought they'd be great. And so what happened was, right, they said, okay, well, hang on. We need to fix this. So we need to have Web 3.1, which was completely about like decentralized NFTs and getting like loans so you could play a game or whatever. Turned out to be a highly financialized mess that basically bankrupted everyone involved except the very early people who were there on top of the pyramid. Speaking of people being bankrupt, unless they're on top of the pyramid, the founder of Celsius, stablecoin, has recently said that he's going to airdrop enormous amounts of stablecoins to anyone who puts money in and keeps it there for more than 3 days.
That's really bold to do, like, the last round of fundraising for your Ponzi scheme, at the point where all of the money is out of the door.
So when you says airdrop, does he mean literally like you get an
Marshall planning? He's like Berlin airlift.
No, I mean like you have to have a Apple iOS device so he can send you an NFT of Jared Leto as the Joker. Like
an airdrop, it's a term in crypto where for holders of a certain, say, currency or NFT, they'll just send more of it to all of the wallet addresses. Called an airdrop.
Okay. I was thinking more about like you're on the subway in New York City and like someone tries to send you a picture of their dick via airdrop.
Yeah, Jared Leto's Joker.
An ape. Yeah,
really into the character. So basically,
an airdrop from Morbius.
Yeah. So if you recall, right, this is what they've done. They created this system that more or less gave rise to that. We've talked about so many different ways in which it fucked up and failed and was incredibly predatory and terrible and was rife with counterfeiting and all this. Everything about it was awful. And they've said, okay, we need to go back to the drawing board here.
Yeah, Web 3.2.
Yeah, we are going to do Web 3.2, where they said, look, Web 3 today centers around expressing transferable financialized assets rather than encoding social relationships of trust. And yet many core economic activities...
No. I see immediately what's going to happen here. They've realized what's a part of a functional banking system, a functional financial system that we need, that we don't have, is like reputation, is good faith, right?
Yeah.
What if we put that on the blockchain?
Yeah, essentially, they said rather than social relationships of trust, yet many core economic activities, such as building personal brands, are built on persistent, non-transferable relationships. Again, you could have just said, well, I guess that means the whole realizing this Web3 was bullshit. We should never have tried it in the first place. It was a badly thought out idea, and it always served to make, again, like a couple banks rich. No. They have one weird trick to try to encode social relationships of trust on the blockchain and fix the financialized mess that is Web3. It's also a reference to World of Warcraft.
Oh, fuck me.
Yeah,
I hate these fucking nerds. I'm sorry, man.
You want a little funny aside?
Yes, please.
My buddy, when he was in Afghanistan, one of his soldiers, like, they pooled their money together and they're like, we call a bee hut. Like, it's like a long house where you have like lots of beds where people would sleep in. And got like, there's this Polish company that sold satellite internet. And he couldn't understand, because they were in the middle of nowhere, why this dude wanted satellite internet so bad. But he convinced like the other guys in his bunkhouse to get to do like whatever the fucking insane fee was per month for satellite internet, because he had a side hustle in 2009, XP grinding characters in World of Warcraft, even while deployed to Afghanistan, and then sell them on eBay. So this kid was literally like out doing fucking foot patrols in the mountains of Wardak province and then coming back and just being like fighting orcs or whatever the fuck you do in World of Warcraft so that he could XP grind to the level and he'd then sell that character to someone who like didn't want to do that work. And to me, I imagine that if that soldier has either died of substance abuse issues post leaving the military or is a crypto guy now. There is no in between.
That's the most American story I've ever heard in my life.
That's right. So, in this paper, Buterin and his co-authors say, we illustrate how non-transferable or soul-bound tokens represent, so instead of NFTs...
Soul-bound?
Yeah, it's bound to your soul. Also, instead of wallets, instead of wallets, it's now called souls.
This sucks really bad.
This sucks so bad.
So it says, in this paper, we illustrate how non-transferable soul-bound tokens representing the commitments, credentials, and affiliations of souls can encode the trust network of the real economy to establish provenance and reputation.
So you get these like souls-bound tokens to represent how long you've been doing this shit, or like how many followers you have on social media, or
you could, for example, say I love that like their use cases are always stuff like things that just aren't a problem really. Where it's like, look, instead of getting a diploma from your university, you could get a token that you'd be unable to sell on.
I feel like if you just made it socially acceptable for people to walk around carrying buster swords, these guys would have normal jobs and we would never have to hear this shit. But like because they feel as though there's something shameful about that, they've now found ways to work this into a thing that people are notionally supposed to care about.
So like, for example, right? Remember how everyone said, oh, great, NFTs are going to democratize art, but then because they can be freely traded and you kind of have no way of knowing where they come from.
Yeah, the all my apes gone problem.
Yeah, well, or also the just sort of proliferation of fakes as well, right? Where I could be like, hey, this is the real Captain Tom Moore. It's a photo of Captain Tom Moore. I've uploaded. Captain Tom Moore uploaded it before he was killed by the British state by being sent to Barbados during COVID. So this is the real one-of-one Captain Tom Moore. And you would know because the soul of Captain Tom Moore on the blockchain, now that it's on the blockchain, would be in the constellation with other souls of his family. And so you'll know that a scammer, Captain Tom Moore, would have put, he wouldn't be like friends with his daughter and son and all this. So I know this is the real Captain Tom soulbound NFT that's selling me this thing. So it's a way of essentially saying, what if we took all of the things that where it just reproduced all of the stuff it was purporting to criticize? What if we just tweaked one bit of the functionality?
What if you had an Ethereum-based Ouija board and you could commune with the soul of Captain Tom, and the way you knew that it was authentic was you had to listen for him to speak to you through the Ethereum Ouija board, which is also the reason why you can't buy a graphics card. And he basically he would give you his key phrases that would let you know it was the genuine article, and they would be, I'm racist, I cheated on my wife, I've always been a Tory.
That's right. That's just his normal voice as well. It's weird. Yeah. But what I think is interesting, right, is because this is the whole way of seeing the world, right? When you are the Ethereum Foundation, is that there is insufficient freedom, and we know that because there are insufficient transactions happening. If there more things were publicly available transactions, the more people would be able to express their freedom by transacting with one another based on perfect information. It's basically a Milton Friedman ideology. And so they were saying, one of the great things we could do with soul-bound tokens, by making, NFTs you can't sell, basically, is that they will be reputational collateral. So, for example, you could, as you complete like programming tasks, then those programming tasks would accrue to your soul, your spiritual human essence, encoded on the blockchain.
What if I had a little like thing of achievements that I could just, it was just following?
They're trying to like invent religion, but in a really because like there's I don't know whether this is true for like every Abrahamic religion, but like one of the key kind of like one of the things you're taught when you're very young, when you go to like Islamic school, is that all the sort of good deeds you do like translate into like bricks, and those bricks like build your house in heaven. It's very sort of like when George Lucas decided that he wanted to quantify the Force in like the prequels, doing the whole like midichlorian thing. It's very much like in that vein. And that was like, not, it was designed because it was like, okay, how do you sort of explain this like to children? This sort of feels like they are trying to do religion, but for children, but also to sort of like quantify. Yeah, it is. I don't know. It feels like a very, and I'm just thinking because a lot of these guys are also just so obsessed with like, the idea that, of like living in godless societies and everything, but they're desperately trying to like invent a religion, but they don't want to do all the kind of like moral philosophy. They just want to quantify everything.
This just feels like a hackathon where everyone involved doesn't realize they're dead, and they don't realize that the hackathon is over, and they just keep fucking going and adding more to this shit. And it's like no one has been able to explain to me like a use case where this whole concept would be better than the way things are done without a blockchain. And
I've got one here.
Oh, great.
Which is, so right what I said, like all of your little like programming tasks that you do accrue to your spirit. And then, that makes you sort of
your Baraka coin or whatever.
That makes you more worthy on Earth. And they say one of the examples of that is you could then do uncollateralized lending to that person based on everything they've ever done. And the more you can encode your entire social life onto the blockchain, the more creditworthy you can seem to coteries of people who will loan you fake internet money that no one uses.
The more you can XP grind in a shed in Afghanistan on Polish internet.
Yeah, it's saying, look, we wanted to build an economy where XP grinding was something you could do and it would be quantifiable and unchangeable. But the problem was that all of those things were too freely exchangeable. And so instead we need to basically you have a digital twin that's just a blockchain wallet that stuff just accrues to. And then people can just decide to lend you money on the basis of what they see in your wallet.
I just love the idea, though, that everything about your work, everything about your employment history, like the tasks you've completed, everything about that is logged in such a way as to stick with you permanently. And people think oh, this is a good idea. Let's be perfectly honest, a solid third to half of white collar workers would only achieve maximum stats on spent time in bathroom in terms of how their employment history would be translated to the blockchain. And it's why would anyone fall for this? Why this just seems
no one needs to is the thing. It's I think the thing is this isn't Web 3.2 in the sense of, oh, this is a fun new little tweak around the edge we can make to try and make it work. This is the Alpine redoubt, right? This is the last fighting position that crypto can come up with. Is no. There's got to be a use case for this.
The blockchain Berchtesgaden, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And what if the last use case was time spent going to the bathroom coin?
And so they even say, look, to be sure, there are dystopian scenarios to consider.
To be sure.
Yeah.
They say, for example, they say regulatory capture could be codified in community tokens where, say, homeowners have disproportionate voting power and stall housing construction. So they were they nimbified the whole thing.
I wonder what it'd be like if that happened.
Yeah, that's right. Or soulbound tokens could automate redlining. Again, I wonder what it would like if that happened.
What a dystopia. Imagine living in that.
Yeah.
So all of these problems are problems they're envisioning which would require a huge amount of success to get there. They would have to replace traditional centralized banking finance. And then it might do the same problems that regular finance already does.
Well, I think the dream is always that by presenting people with the freer version of society that's based on infinite transactions, that it will be so manifestly what people prefer that all of the sort of legacy banks will say just fold because no one will transact with them anymore.
Sure. And then they're going to abolish restaurants, whatever.
But that is of course the theory underpinning this entire thing, right? Where they're asking what they're going to do when they finally take over society, and they still don't realize that they are a token for the parting of suckers with their money and giving it back to J.P. Morgan. They say, we call this pluralistic ecosystem decentralized society, a co-determined sociality where souls and communities come together bottom up as emergent properties of each other to co-create plural network goods and intelligences.
Can you imagine if your society were decentralized?
You couldn't have the Joker on the blockchain because he relies too much on a centralized society.
All of this, once again, just seems like if you had told me, oh, psych, this was actually an AI-generated text that I was just fooling you guys with for this whole episode, I would believe you.
Yeah, that would be fun. But no, I'm afraid it was generated by an actual eye. They say
very dubious.
Yeah. But they say, right, once you solve these problems, right, once you, because you realize, we tried to create this trustless world of no institutions, and then oopsie daisy, by making the entire universe of your life center on the idea of transacting, it became hyper-financialized and unusable. They said, okay, finally, now it's going to take this to make all of this DeFi stuff, all this Web3 stuff, actually able to support activities that are just ubiquitous in the real world, like signing an apartment lease. They were like, this was the thing, not everything else, not the fundamental theory. And, you know, I mean, as much as it is, there is some schadenfreude in seeing, you know, all of these things basically fall over, and there is some schadenfreude in it. Again, you're just like, well, a smaller number of people are going to be suckered by the promise that, oh, it's going to work now.
I don't necessarily know if it's even schadenfreude, because I feel like schadenfreude implies that you're just taking pleasure in someone's misery, but they don't deserve it. I feel like these guys definitely deserve it. This is just Freude. Like, I wanted to ask Hussein this question specifically, but please, everyone weigh in. So I used to write for my high school paper a long, long time ago. I started high school in 1999. I graduated in 2003. None of my articles, my like sort of columns that I wrote as a high schooler, are still available online. If they ever were available online on the very, very primitive Web 1.0 website my high school newspaper might have had, they're no longer there. I would be surprised if any of the columns I wrote for my college newspaper are still online. If they are, they're deeply, deeply buried. I'm very grateful for that, because I would be embarrassed by some of the dumb shit that I said when I was 17, 18 years old. Genuinely. I would be embarrassed by the dumb shit that I said when I was in my early 20s. And I am grateful that those, you know, some of my early bylines don't exist anymore, for example. The last thing on earth that I would want is every single thing that I have ever done in terms of professional employment, accomplishments, things along those lines, to be tied to me, easily accessible. And Hussein, I know you've worn like a million hats in your journalistic career. Like, do you feel the same way? Because to me, like, the idea of this seems like I feel as though I've escaped this fate by the skin of my teeth, but everyone else who might be socialized into a world where even just like one 1/100th of this shit that Riley's just read becomes the norm. That sounds horrifying.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm pretty sure some of my like columns of slurs that I wrote for the Retail Gazette were still no. Actually, you know what? This kind of like, so there are, you know, because before I've talked about this on the show about how like for lots of people who kind of find themselves like becoming interested and engaging with like leftist politics, it didn't sort of come naturally. It came as like a result of sort of getting fired from like multiple jobs, like getting let go from multiple jobs. And, you know, so before, like, I wasn't always kind of like someone who would identify on the left. And like, there are certainly columns or like articles that I wrote for my student newspaper where like, you know, including one that I think was like supportive of Western intervention in Syria, which like they exist. And if people have sent them to me and they've tried to do like this you. And like, you know, it hasn't really sort of had the effect that they wanted, which I guess is the reason why they've stopped for now. Although, like, I wouldn't be surprised if those ones emerged again. But yeah, it's not, for me, it's like a broad inconvenience, because like, thankfully, being a professional clown, I somehow now have like some like career security. But I think for like younger people who work in media, but also just like younger people generally who are like writing online because that's the only thing you can really do to sort of express like dissatisfaction and stuff. Like the idea of, you know, that's already tied to you, right? Like people are already finding that, people are already sort of developing an idea of who you are, like a composite character of you based on most things. And as we've sort of spoken about on the show, and as I speak about on like 10K posts, like from time to time, quite often those composite characters tend to be more definitive in like bigger aspects of your life than you would like to. And every time I hear like, you know, crypto stuff, and crucially people kind of making the use case for crypto being, oh, you know, this is like an uneditable, like, you know, ledger where like, you know, everything you do online will be like recorded, which means that you'll be, you know, you're presenting your true authentic self. It's like, no, that's horrible. That's like not only sort of like antithetical to like,
that's the thing that religions threaten you with.
Yeah. And like, that's why I like the right to be forgotten. I think it's part of the reason why everyone is so insane now, is because we all have to act as if we've always held a consistent ideology. We've never been hypocrites. We've never been wrong and been afraid to admit
and
it.
Crucially, as like people who are kind of, you know, especially like, I think people like us who have like a certain kind of small degree of celebrity, but definitely people who are like on, you know, broader levels, like the fact that like people do genuinely think that you are like the online character that you sort of present yourself as, and they get like genuinely offended, like some people getting like genuinely offended and disappointed, but like you are not the character that you appear to be online, right? Or they get very confused when they sort of confront you and like, oh, you're a normal person. Like, that's really disappointing. Like, you know, like I find that very funny, but like if you sort of extend that for like more periods, it's like, yeah, having this expectation that like you are this kind of curated character that like platforms incentivize online and that you sort of have to live up to in order to sort of maintain a very basic level of income in this extremely precarious economic climate. Like, that's a lot of pressure to put on people, but it's also like incredibly inhuman. And I think, and I'll end my kind of rant at this point. Like, I think that like, all the kind of like these sorts of making these sorts of use cases for blockchain and Web3 and everything, like this sort of being how tech guys like define authenticity is really just the it's really just entrenching this idea that like organic human interaction and reception and compassion and empathy that comes with that, like, is now completely obsolete. And like, ultimately you are judged by like how you curate yourself at all times.
Well, the other thing that it makes completely obsolete, as well as all of that, is interiority. You know, you are not your interior. You are not anything about your interior life. You are purely what is recordable as, you might say, XP grinding. Whether that's stuff you've thought or JavaScript tutorials you've done.
What if we made real life as miserable as MMOs?
Yeah, well, that seems to be what the like Vitalik Buterin was so burned by MMOs that he's decided to make real life into one.
He is the Joker.
And effectively, right, like what it's saying is, well, it's a vision of truth-telling and authenticity that says everything about you has to be public and searchable and decomposable, but also decomposable by, say, potential employers. So because what happens, I think, the thing to always remember is that when information is about you and people comparable to you is taken and aggregated, then the person who has access to that information and can slice it up as they choose then has power over you in a very meaningful way. And what the Web 3.2 promise seems to be is, by trying to force a lot of this information to the surface from everyone, by making it, and again, the utopian dream that they have is to make everyone sort of have to disclose all this stuff all the time to be able to just say transact and live normally, because they want these ubiquitous activities like signing an apartment lease to be through their system. Is what that's asking for is the total obliteration of any kind of interiority in favor of the ability to be perfectly researched by anyone who has the wherewithal to do it.
It's basically granting like the capabilities of quote tweeting and saying this you to the eye of Sauron. And it's basically like, oh, you claim to be against homophobia, but in 2010 your display name on the Apple Games portal was a fat gay man. So you know what? I feel as though I have no right to comment. And it's just, there's a part of me that also wonders if the logical follow-up to this would be people just really not caring at all. You know what I mean? Like the opposite of rather than people being way more circumspect, it just being that like normalizing the things that we are trying to discourage in our society.
Well, we kind of, you know I mean? And we're kind of sort of seeing that with like, you know, I don't want to bring up like the culture wars, but just like even sort of like the cancel culture backlash and everything. And how that's sort of being used and leveraged by certain people to kind of advance like types of behavior and language that is like, you know, really like, you know, slurs and like offenses and stuff, and trying to frame them in ways that are like, oh, you know, it's a joke, or like, you know, do you know what I mean? Just like, you know, we're sort of seeing that type of backlash emerge from a particular sector. So it's kind of like what we're actually seeing is not necessarily like the eradication of like, you know, cancel culture or eradication of like this type of like surveillance, but rather like seeing one side with like a lot of power and with like tech behind them and like fully supportive of them, getting to sort of like define what that territory is. And because they have like the power and resources, again, as we've spoken about earlier on, at a time when like state power and like, you know, state institutions are like on the brink of collapse, they can sort of define like what acceptable language is.
The cops stop you and they issue you with shoplifting SBT.
That's right. And it happened like, and it just so happens that like the acceptable behaviors and language and so on are like extremely compatible with like asset services that render everything to be transactional.
Mm-hmm. So I think I'm going to pull it to a close roughly there. And then to wish our dear, sweet, stricken colleague Milo a very fond, please stop shitting.
We hope
just in general.
Yeah.
You go too far in the other direction and go Bolsonaro mode.
Never shit again, Milo. Never shit again.
This sort of forgotten more Bond movie.
But in order to perform the role of Milo Edwards tonight, American Milo Edwards, I can only say we have a Patreon. It's $5 a month. It gets you a bunch of content. You also have Britanology and the second Britanology available on the forbidden $10 tier. Thank you so much for being listeners. Thank you so much
Milo,
for supporting us.
do you have any tour dates?
I do. I am completing a world tour between my bed and the toilet.
Yeah, he's gonna be driving his beloved car slowly up and down Mare Street. And also, I want to say something I've forgotten to do for a while is to thank Ginseng for the use of our theme song. Here we go. You can find it on Spotify. If you were wondering what it is, that's what it is, and I'm going to try to remember to start referencing it every episode now.
And so now we close with Here We Go by Ginseng. Thank you for listening.